Hey, I'm Bryan Fenley. I'm a commentator for Tennis Channel and do other sports as well. And my guest today on the platform is Eric Rothman. He does many sports for ESPN: basketball, boxing, golf, Little League World Series. You name it, he went to Syracuse, and we're going to share his story and do it in a way that goes beyond just what he is doing in sports media. A place where we learn about him being a dad, we learn about his upbringing. We learn a lot more than what you see from him on your screen when you're watching one of his games. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. Here is my chat with Eric. This conversation was due to happen because I have interviewed so many of his friends, so many of his colleagues. It was only fate that I'd get to have on Eric Rothman with me. From Syracuse, now with ESPN, he does a wide variety of different sports, of course, college basketball, golf, baseball, Little League World Series, boxing. And he's going to tell his story here on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, Tennis Channel, and other outlets like golf. And Eric, I am stoked to have you on. I know I've been following your story. And as you know, in this conversation, we're going to go beyond just talking about work. We're going to learn about the human side of Eric Rothman. I hope you're ready.
I'm ready. I told you before we started, I feel, without knowing you, I feel like I know you from all the connections, mutual connections, and people that have been on the show that pop up on my Twitter and LinkedIn feed. So it's great. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, speaking of social media and where we start here, and it was a buzz because of something that involves Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
How did Zach Wilson make you more famous?
How did Zach Will? Yeah, it was my 5 minutes of fame this Thanksgiving. I was broadcasting the Wooden Legacy tournament for ESPN college basketball, one of the Feast Week tournaments, working with Corey Williams, University of Arizona, former player and guy that I've called that tournament and other games with for a long time. We have a really good relationship on the air. And yeah, somebody threw an errant pass. It was like the week. It was the week after Zach Wilson had been benched, or the week of that Zach Wilson being benched. And yeah, I made a comment about the errant pass being known as the Zach Wilson, and awful announcing picked it up, and they went from there. And yeah, so when you're on TV long enough, and you say, especially live TV, you say things, somebody's ears are gonna perk up, and that was my claim to fame this year.
Where do you find that you're able to really throw in your personality in the broadcast the most?
It's a great question. So I'm going to credit Sean Farnham for helping that. I don't know if he even remembers this conversation. So Sean and I, when I first started working for ESPN, most of the games I was doing was West Coast Conference, and I was kind of thrown into the deep end without, frankly, not probably having as much experience as I should have, given the nature of the games. I was calling number one Gonzaga games, right out of the gate, and it's intimidating. And working with a guy like Sean is frankly intimidating. I mean, the guy is excellent on air and knows more about college basketball than probably any person in the country. And so, we did a few games together, and then we ended up, after one of the games, and I think it must have been in Spokane. We're having a drink after the game, and he said to me, and Sean, to Sean's credit, he is very candid and very honest with anybody he works with or comes across. And he said, he's like, I got to tell you something. He's like, you're good. You're good, but this conversation we're having right now at the bar is not coming across when we're doing games. And I was like, yeah. I was like, and I knew, and then, sometimes when somebody says something to you that you knew already, but you just needed to hear it from somebody else. Yeah. And that's what it was. It was Sean telling me that. In the back of my mind, I knew it, because I like to be kind of sarcastic and dry and throw my humor into things as I would if I were watching a game, with my buddies on the couch, or at a bar or whatever. And that wasn't coming across. And so I worked, really hard and made a conscious effort to say, it's okay to be myself more instead of what I think I'm supposed to be. And so that was a big turning point for me. I think, just personally, I don't know if anybody, who had ever, watched me would have noticed, but it was something that stuck out to me. So, credit to Sean for, not only pointing that out, but that's what good partners do. I think is, be honest, and if we can make the broadcast better, and frankly, since then, I don't get to work with Sean nearly as much as I used to, but since then, some of the most fun I've had on air has been with Sean. I mean, I feel so much more comfortable simply from that one conversation.
How long did it take you, Eric, to flip that switch, that the conversation that came out from your conversation with Sean, and then to implement what he was saying? How did you work yourself through that to a point where you were very comfortable saying, hey, Sean, now look what I can do?
I think it was pretty quick, only because I felt like it was, the things that I wanted to say were on the tip of my tongue, in the back of my head. And I was withholding, or I wasn't, being my true self on the air. And so, just again, it goes back to the comfortability. Like, are you comfortable on air? Are you relaxed? Are you not so focused on your notes or your preparation or the atmosphere or this, that, and the millions of things that are going on in live television, the producer in your ear, what your analyst is saying. You work, for me, I work with different analysts all the time, different personalities, different styles. And there's so many things to get distracted from. And, kind of goes back to, that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours kind of thing. Just the more you do it, the more comfortable you are with shutting out all those other things around you and focusing on what you really need to be focused on. And so, I've been doing it long enough to where, I was comfortable with the X's and O's of broadcasting. And it was just a matter of, kind of releasing that, whatever that was, that barrier that was stopping me from, being authentic or being more natural. And I think came pretty quickly. I don't know if there was a specific game or instance, but poking fun at the analysts, poking fun at myself, poking fun at producers and referees. We have a lot of fun, and that's what we're there for. This isn't rocket science. This isn't surgery. It's like, let's have a good time for a couple hours and be on our merry way.
Yeah, you want to have some fun. You want to be entertaining. Eric Rothman is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. Eric, of course, with ESPN. I'm with Tennis Channel. And for Eric, for you broke down a really interesting dynamic where you're explaining the chaos that can come in some of these atmospheres where, like you said, you got your producer in your ear. You're trying to listen to what your analyst is saying so that you hear what that person says. And then when you follow up, you're like, I got to know what he says so that I can make it transition cleanly into the conversation and where you take it next. And then not forgetting what is happening out on the court, everything that you're trying to keep track of. That tunnel vision that you've been able to really fine tune, where in other elements of your life have you seen that? Or more so, how has tunnel vision, eliminating distractions, helped you, especially when you were first getting started? You knew what you wanted to do, and then there was the effort and the time and the energy that you needed to put into it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a weird mix of tunnel vision and the ability to, think on your feet, multitask. I mean, yes, you have to be focused on what's happening in the moment, but while you're speaking, there's people in your ear, there's things going on in the game, and there's movement, there's sound, there's everything. And so, I've always been somebody that I think is very much focused on where I want to go, not necessarily from like a North Star point of view. I've always said, like, if I'm calling more games than I did the last year, or if I'm calling a new sport than I did the last year, then that's great. Then I'm moving forward. So I don't necessarily know if it's a tunnel vision necessarily on one specific thing, or one specific aspect of the career or the trajectory that I've been on. It's more so of, there's always a lot of things going on in your life, in whether you're calling a game, whatever. I mean, I work a full-time job outside of broadcasting, and I have since I left college. I've got 2 kids. I've got a wife. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so you have to make time for, continuing to put the effort and the focus on the things that are important to you, whether that's professionally, personally, whatever. And so, whether it's taking 5 minutes out of your day to email a producer, to call somebody, to send a quick text to somebody that you haven't talked to in a year. It's in the business to say, hey man, like I remember we worked together. We did this game. We did this event 3 years ago. Like, how's it going? I think this industry, especially from you and I, in the part of the industry we're in, which is the play-by-play, it's just very fluid. You're working with different people all the time. You're assigned to this producer or this analyst, and it's very easy to lose those relationships. And ultimately, those are the relationships that push your career forward. Because it's, from a talent standpoint, it's a subjective business to begin with. So if you're building those relationships, you're taking the time, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time. That tunnel vision you're talking about doesn't necessarily have to take up your entire day, but as long as you're putting the effort in, it usually pays off.
Who has taken that time for you, Eric, to really kind of metaphorically put his or her arm around you and say, look, you got talent. Now I want to help you get there?
It's been a couple people. I I started doing some sort of broadcasting when I was 14 years old. I just, by happenstance, I went to public school in Cincinnati, and the middle school that I went to had a closed circuit TV station where they did a TV news, program every day. You had to try out to be on it. You had to go do field pieces, real things at 14 years old. So that, Bob Brosmer, who was the teacher that ran that program, was one. When I was in high school, and I played sports, but for the sports that I didn't do, I had a history teacher named Tom Wilson who said, why don't you do public address announcing? Why don't you do that? So I started doing that for basketball after I got cut after my sophomore year. And then after college, when I got the job working for the Lakers organization, one of my producers was Olivia Stomsky, who worked for Pro Angle Media for a really long time, and she's one of the greatest people alive, and now works at Syracuse University, both of our alma maters. And she was really supportive. And then at ESPN, Chris Farrow, was the first guy to give me a shot there. And so it's again, you go back to those relationships, and you're right. The way you worded it is right. It's a lot of times it feels like you're putting in all the effort, right? Like, I'm trying to get jobs. I'm trying to put my name out there. I'm sending out my reel. I'm trying to introduce myself, network, all this stuff. And sometimes you get lucky, and there's a person who's going to reciprocate that and say, hey, I see all this effort you're doing here, and I'm in a position to help you, or at least give you some advice. And, those people that I just mentioned, have done that for me along the way.
Chris Farrow is a gem, as are all the others that you mentioned. He's got the West Coast Mafia, as he calls it, as you know. When he comes out to the West Coast, it's always a fun time with the parties and getting everybody together who works in television. And my girlfriend went to Syracuse as well, so
nice.
It's interesting. She works in a little bit different sector. She actually works over at Top Golf, but so she works in sports in a different way. But it's really cool because obviously she probably knows people that and it's a very tight knit community. And you hit on a couple really interesting things about the people in your life that need to stand up for yourself. But what about you personally? I guess you could say, having to be thick-skinned, where did that come out the most for you, Eric?
That I think I get from my dad, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but was the biggest influence in my life, and was a native New Yorker. Grew up in New York City, not well off at all. Grew up in government housing in Far Rockaway, and was a tough, thick-skinned New Yorker. I mean, that's who he was, and great sense of humor, and we. Most of my life, I was born on the East Coast, but most of my life was spent, growing up in the Midwest. So you don't get that as much in the Midwest. And so I learned that from him. And, he always encouraged me to try different things, to if I was interested in whatever it was, pushing me towards that. For instance, when I was probably must have been 15 years old, started umpiring.
Wow.
I love baseball. It was a great way to make money, and but it's also a thing where you got to be thick skinned, especially at 15 years old when you got parents yelling at you and all this stuff. And thick skin, I think is parallel to confidence, right? It's you have to have the belief in yourself that no matter what is coming in from the outside is like, okay, I know who I am, I know what I want to be or what I want to do, and it doesn't matter what that exterior noise is. And this is a performative business. People are not, especially when you're on TV, like people are you don't look the way we want you to look. You're not the age we want you to. We don't like your beard. We don't like this, that, or the other thing. We don't like the sound of your voice. What can you do? What can you do?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things, you could work with a voice coach. You could, work on things. You could put on muscle. If you're too skinny, you can lose weight if you're too, but there's only so much you can do. At some point, this is a subject. Like I've said before, it's a subjective business. It's the people who are hiring have preferences for whatever it is. And so if you start taking that stuff personally, it's a tough business to be in if that stuff is going to bother you.
How big of a strike zone did you have as an umpire?
It depended on the children's ages. So I think the rule was you had to be at least 2 years older than the players. So if I was 15, that meant the max that I was umpiring was like 13. And so, but you get all the way down to 7, 8 years old, and it's just like, ring them up. Let's go. Ankles to shoulders. Let's swing the bat. Let's get it moving here.
What was the closest call at home plate that you ever had to decipher?
Oh God, I'm sure there were. I do actually remember one where there was a balk that walked in a run, and it's one of those things where what the right call is, but as soon as you make it, and as soon as everybody else is yelling at you, oh wait, was that the right call? Was that the rule? Is that the rule? Do I need to pull out the rule book from my back pocket and make sure? But yeah, that one in particular is the one I remember in terms of like the most commotion happening outside of the game.
And then you have to deal with the parents and what they say, and to think that these are kids. Like, what you're probably hearing everything. Like, what are you hearing from these parents? Just everything, I would think.
Yeah, everything. I will say, I this was 20 years ago at this point. I think it's gotten way worse. These videos that you see on YouTube and people. Yeah. I don't know why anybody would want to be an umpire or referee. At this point, especially for youth sports, at this point in time, it's horrible the way they're treated. But yeah, it's at least from the way I did it was a matter of laying the expectations before the game, talking to the coaches during the ground rules and saying, listen, I'm not going to tolerate this, that, and the other. If you want to talk to me as the coach, you're allowed to. Parents aren't allowed to. Kids aren't allowed to. And any making the coach aware that like anything I hear from the parents that I don't like comes back to you. You're the person who's responsible for that, and the team's going to be penalized because of that for whatever I was able to do in terms of penalties. But no, luckily it was pretty good. I don't have too many memories of it being a negative experience.
What's different between how you umpire and how you parent?
Oh man, that's a great question. What's different? Well, the players are not nearly as sassy as my 4-year-old daughter is. And that's a really good question that I never have thought about, but I'm sure it's more similar than it is, different in the sense that, you're there to make sure that everything goes according to plan, that everybody's having a good time, that, people who are not following the rules are being governed, and that there are penalties, around that and consequences around that. And so I think it's probably really similar. You're the umpire of your house, of your family, and my wife shares in that duty as well. And listen, I mean, sometimes you throw your hands up and be like, listen, the players or the kids, they won today. Today's the today I did not win today. But that's why you lace them up, you go back out there tomorrow.
How do you cherish those moments with them? Considering everything you talked about earlier, I'm surprised you have time for this conversation. Just
Yeah.
the way in which you're able to be present with your family.
Yeah, that's another one. That's especially, with all the travel that we do for this business, live games, they're usually not close. Um it was really, I mean, one of the very few benefits of a global pandemic was being able to broadcast games remotely. And we still do a little bit for ESPN. But for 2 years, which were, really formative years from in my kids' lives. My oldest daughter was 2. My youngest was born a year and a half ago. So right in the middle of everything. So that was a huge help. For me personally, was to not have to travel, was to be able to go in my office that I'm sitting in now, call a game while the kids were asleep, and be right back. That they never knew anything was going on. Now that we're back to traveling, I do my best to leave the last possible second that I can and come back the earliest possible second that I can, so that I'm not, so I'm not missing things. I'm not spending a day or two in wherever, Corvallis, Oregon, hanging out and checking out the local haunts. I'm getting in, I'm getting out. And it's again, it's going back to that prioritizing your time and prioritizing your focus. And if I need to work on my charts after they go to bed, that's fine. I'll deal with being tired. I'd rather deal with, limited sleep than, missing out on one thing or another, and not being around for them.
When you get back from traveling, you get back from a game, your car pulls up to the house. What's on your kids' face when they see you, knowing you're about to walk in the door?
Well, they're excited. My 1 year old, she's usually very excited. My 4 year old now has just associated me going away with gifts when I return. So the first, it's not even like a hello, good to see you, daddy. It's like, where's my gift? Where's my surprise? You were gone, I get a surprise. So we're trying to tamp that down a little bit, but that's usually the initial reaction.
What do you like to bring back for her on the trips?
Um, so I cheated this last time out. I called my wife and I said, "Can you go to Target and pick something up while they're at school, while they're at daycare, and I'll just hand it to her when I come in the door." Usually it's a doll or something goofy that I get from, if I'm driving from some rest stop along the way. It's she's 4. It's a matter of, it's the thrill of getting something. Like, that's all she cares about. Like, 20 minutes later, you could ask her what I got, and she had no idea. And she's on to the next thing. It's just like, oh, daddy was nice enough to get me something on his trip, and I'm excited about it. And I get to look at it and play with it for a few minutes, and then my attention span is over, and, and I'm on to the next thing.
What do you care about beyond your family, beyond your work, and your closest colleagues and friends and family?
It's kind of it right there. It's interesting. Why, from I'll answer that from like a professional standpoint, as to like why people get in this business to begin with. And I'm sure everybody, you and I probably, without even knowing it, I'm sure have a very similar, origin story. It's usually kids that are like really love sports, that are okay playing them sometimes, maybe good playing them, and decide like, hey, if I can't do this, play sports as a profession, I want to get into it in some other realm, and broadcasting is one of those ways of doing it. And so, outside of those things that you just mentioned, what do I care about is, this has been a great outlet for me. Sports broadcasting has been a great outlet for me to, have things to look forward to make memories, to have experiences, to, meet some really amazing people, and work with some really amazing people that, I don't know, if you would have told me, 20 years ago when I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, oh yeah, you're going to work with AC Green, and you're going to work with Adrian Branch, and you're going to work with Sean Farn, all these guys. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll sign up for that. So what I care about is, sure, would I love to, I don't know, call the Masters or the World Series or the Super Bowl? Yeah, but there's very few people who get to do that. But if you're lucky enough and you stick around this business long enough, you get to meet a lot of really cool people and make a lot of really cool memories and have a lot of really cool experiences. So, that's ultimately what I care about.
So much of it is timing, being there, and hanging around. And you've
Yeah.
done that and more. And you have created so many great experiences and great memories. And I hope that this little time in our conversation is one of those as well as we wrap up this conversation. Eric Rothman, I'm Bryan Fenley. Eric, thanks so much, man. This was a lot of fun telling your
Yeah.
story.
This is great. Hopefully we get to do it in person and get the golf bags out there sooner rather than later.